October 2014, Raqqa's desert winds howled as journalist Kenji Goto stepped into ISIS territory, camera in hand, risking everything to save a captured friend. Hours later, he vanished, leaving Japan waiting, terrified, and desperate to know what happened inside that brutal war zone. Here are 5 hostages who captured their final moments. January 23, 2002, Karachi, Pakistan. As dusk settled over the city, Pearl, a Wall Street Journal reporter, left his hotel. He believed he was heading to an interview with Sheikh Mubarak Ali Gilani, a prominent Islamic cleric. But what awaited him that evening was not the story he had been chasing, but a carefully orchestrated trap. Daniel Pearl was no stranger to danger. Born October 10, 1963, in Princeton, New Jersey, he was raised in Los Angeles, where curiosity about the world and a love for music shaped his early years. After graduating Phi Beta Kappa from Stanford University in 1985, he quickly distinguished himself as a reporter with an uncanny knack for finding the human stories behind the headlines. By 2001, he was the South Asia bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, covering the aftermath of 9/11 from Mumbai and frequently venturing into Pakistan. But this assignment in Karachi was different. Pearl was investigating alleged connections between Al-Qaeda and Richard Reed, the infamous shoe bomber. His sources pointed him to Sheikh Gilani, and Pearl arranged a meeting at the Village restaurant for January 23rd. Instead, he was kidnapped near the Metropole Hotel, falling into the hands of a militant group calling itself the National Movement for the Restoration of Pakistani Sovereignty. The kidnappers moved quickly. 5 days later, they sent photos to news agencies. Pearl, handcuffed, with a gun to his head, holding up a newspaper. Their demands were clear: release Pakistani prisoners from Guantanamo, resume a halted shipment of F-16 fighter jets, and various other concessions. The threat was explicit. We give you one more day. If America will not meet our demands, we will kill Daniel. Then this cycle will continue, and no American journalist could enter Pakistan. As weeks passed with no resolution, the terrorists escalated their threats. On February 21st, they released a video titled "The Slaughter of the Spy Journalist, the Jew Daniel Pearl." In the 3-minute clip, Pearl is seen condemning American foreign policy. Statements his family later said were clearly made under duress. He identifies himself: "My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, I am Jewish," and adds a personal detail about his great-grandfather helping to found the Israeli town of Bnei Brak. These words, delivered with a mixture of defiance and resignation, would become his final testimony. The video ends with his brutal execution, his throat slit and his head severed. It was a calculated act of terror, meant to send a message far beyond Pakistan's borders. Pearl's remains wouldn't be found for nearly 3 months. On May 16th, his severed head and dismembered body were discovered in a shallow grave outside Karachi. Abdul Sattar Eddy, a renowned Pakistani humanitarian, personally ensured his remains were returned to the United States for burial at Mount Sinai Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. The investigation into Pearl's murder was complex, involving multiple terrorist groups operating under the umbrella organization Lashkar-e-Omar. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, a British national with ties to several jihadist organizations, emerged as the principal architect of the kidnapping. He had previously been released from an Indian prison in exchange for hostages during the hijacking of Indian Airlines Flight 814 in 1999. Sheikh surrendered to authorities in February 2002 and was convicted in July, sentenced to death, a sentence that would later be controversially overturned. But further investigation revealed an even more chilling detail. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, claimed responsibility for personally beheading Pearl. Forensic analysis of the execution video later supported this confession. The legal proceedings surrounding Pearl's murder have been fraught with controversy. In April 2020, a Pakistani court overturned Sheikh's murder conviction, reducing his sentence to time served for kidnapping. Despite international outrage and appeals from the United States and Pearl's family, Pakistan's Supreme Court upheld this decision in early 2021. Sheikh now resides under guard in a government safe house. rather than a prison cell. The impact of Daniel Pearl's murder reverberated far beyond his family and colleagues. His parents, Judea and Ruth Pearl, established the Daniel Pearl Foundation to promote cross-cultural understanding through journalism and music. His widow, Marianne Pearl, chronicled his life and death in the memoir A Mighty Heart, later adapted into a film starring Angelina Jolie. President Barack Obama signed the Daniel Pearl Freedom of the Press Act in 2010, expanding protections for journalists worldwide. Pearl's final words have become a rallying cry against hatred and extremism. His father, Judea Pearl, compiled a collection of global responses to these words in the book, I Am Jewish: Personal Reflections Inspired by the Last Words of Daniel Pearl. The Daniel Pearl World Music Days, held annually since 2002, have united musicians across 60 countries in a message of harmony and understanding. Through his journalism, Daniel Pearl sought to bridge cultural divides and reveal the human stories behind global events. But even as devastating as his death was, the next case talks about another journalist who faced a threat far worse than anyone could have imagined. November 22, 2012, northwestern Syria. The air was thick with tension as James Foley, an American journalist, and his British colleague John Cantley left an internet cafe for the Turkish border. It was supposed to be a routine trip, just another day for a seasoned war correspondent. But it would end with Foley's abduction and the beginning of a nearly 2-year ordeal that would shock the world. James Foley wasn't new to danger. Born October 18, 1973 in Evanston, Illinois, he'd built a reputation for reporting from some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones. After earning degrees from Marquette University, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism, Foley started as a teacher before turning to journalism. He embedded with military units in Iraq and Afghanistan, reported for Global Post and Agence France Presse, and covered the Libyan uprising against Muammar Gaddafi. 2011 saw Foley's first brush with captivity. While reporting near Brega, Libya, he and fellow journalists were attacked by Gaddafi's forces. Photojournalist Anton Hamrell was killed. Foley and others were beaten and held for 44 days. You go through different emotions when you're in captivity, he later reflected. Rather than deter him, the experience seemed to strengthen his resolve. He returned to conflict reporting, believing frontline journalism is important. Without it, we can't tell the world how bad it might be. But Syria was different. When Foley and Cantley were abducted, their taxi driver and Foley's translator were left behind. Clear evidence of a targeted operation. Initial intelligence suggested he was held by Syrian government forces, possibly in a Damascus prison. But these leads proved false. Foley's captors were members of what would become the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. For months, Foley was held with other Western hostages, moved frequently to avoid detection. Torture, mock executions, and psychological torment became routine. His captors demanded a staggering ransom, $100 million, for his release, far beyond what any Western government would pay. Global Post, Foley's employer, spent millions on efforts to locate and rescue him, even hiring international security firm Kroll Inc., but their information was always one step behind. In June 2014, Danish hostage Daniel Rye Ottesen was released. He carried a memorized message, Foley's final letter to his family. It described improvised games and lectures among the 17 hostages, small comforts in a world turned upside down. The letter would later be published by his family, a testament to Foley's strength and humanity under impossible circumstances. The U.S. attempted a daring rescue in July 2014. Special Operations Forces, including Delta Force commandos, helicopters, and drones, targeted a suspected location in Raqqa, Syria. They met heavy resistance but found only empty cells. Foley and the other hostages had been moved. Another missed opportunity. August 12, 2014. Foley's parents received an email from ISIS. They blamed the U.S. for refusing to pay ransom or negotiate prisoner exchanges. The message was clear. Foley would be executed in retaliation for American airstrikes against ISIS. Even then, his family held out hope, preparing to break U.S. law by offering payment for his release. But time was running out. August 19, 2014, ISIS released a video titled A Message to America. It began with President Obama's announcement of airstrikes. Then cut to Foley, kneeling in the desert beside a masked executioner. Foley read a prepared statement expressing regret, clearly under duress. The video ended with his brutal beheading, the first American citizen murdered by ISIS. The executioner, later identified as Mohammed Emwazi, dubbed Jihadi John, threatened more executions if U.S. airstrikes continued. The video was professionally produced, aimed squarely at Western audiences, and quickly spread across the internet despite efforts to contain it. British authorities warned that viewing, downloading, or sharing the video could constitute a terrorism offense. Social media platforms raced to block and remove the footage. Foley's murder sent shockwaves through the journalistic community and the world. President Obama condemned the killing, emphasizing that ISIS's victims were overwhelmingly Muslim and calling for a united front against such nihilistic ideologies. The Associated Press declared that the assassination of a journalist in wartime should be considered an international crime of war. In the aftermath, Foley's family started the James W. Foley Legacy Fund to support hostage families, conflict journalists, and educational opportunities for urban youth. The James Foley Scholarship was established at Marquette University, and the Medill School of Journalism created the James Foley Medill Medal for Courage in Journalism. Colleagues and organizations, including Agence France-Presse, changed policies about reporting in conflict zones, refusing to accept freelance work from areas too dangerous for staff correspondence. Foley's remains were never recovered, despite efforts to locate and return his body. In November 2015, his executioner, Mohammed Emwazi, was killed in a targeted drone strike in Raqqa. But Foley's legacy endures, not as a victim, but as a courageous journalist who gave his life to expose the truth of war and suffering. His story reminds us that the pursuit of truth often comes at great cost. James Foley's final moments, captured by his murderers, were intended as propaganda, but in death, as in life, he bore witness to the realities of conflict zones, giving voice to those who had none. His sacrifice continues to inspire journalists and truth seekers worldwide, a testament to the enduring power of courageous reporting in the face of barbarism. But if you thought Foley's story was harrowing, what happened to the next journalist on our list exposes new levels of brutality in the modern age of warfare and propaganda. September 2nd, 2014, a lone journalist kneels in the sand, calm, steady, heartbreakingly composed. His name, Steven Sotloff. And before the world even knows his full story, ISIS forces the camera to roll. But rewind the tape, because the moment you're seeing, the moment that horrified the world, didn't begin in a desert. It began years earlier, with a young reporter who believed truth was worth crossing war zones for. Steven Sotloff didn't start out chasing danger. He started with something far quieter. Purpose. Born May 11, 1983, in Florida, he grew up steeped in history, especially the history carried by his grandparents, Holocaust survivors who taught him what happens when truth dies in silence. That legacy shaped him. It pushed him toward the Middle East, a place he felt inexplicably pulled to understand.
A birthright trip to Israel changed everything. Suddenly, the region wasn't an assignment, it was a calling. He became a dual citizen, traveled back and forth, learned Arabic in Yemen, and threw himself into some of the toughest places on earth. He wasn't interested in shock value or splashy headlines. He cared about the people who never made the front page. He wanted to tell their stories in war zones across Syria, Egypt, Libya, and Bahrain. Sotloff became known for two things: courage and compassion. Colleagues joked he was a stand-up philosopher from Miami, but they meant it. He thought deeply, cared deeply, and treated people in crisis with real humanity. In places where most reporters kept their distance, he listened. He asked questions no one else bothered to ask. His Benghazi reporting alone gained the respect of veteran correspondents who rarely praised anyone. But even the strongest spirits wear down. By July 2013, exhausted and bruised from years in conflict zones, Sotloff confided in fellow journalist Ben Taub. "I'm sick of being beaten up and shot at and accused of being a spy," he admitted. He planned to go home soon, rest, reset, maybe rethink the next chapter. But first, one last assignment: Syria. It would be his final decision as a free man. August 4th, 2013, near Aleppo, Sotloff was traveling with his fixer and the fixer's family.
when a group of armed militants blocked the road. The family was released. Steven wasn't. He disappeared into the maze of ISIS captivity. No confirmed location, no demands, no updates. Just silence. For more than a year, he endured torture, starvation, and constant psychological terror. Yet somehow, he managed to protect the two things that would have guaranteed even harsher punishment. His Jewish identity and Israeli citizenship. He hid them brilliantly. He even faked illness to avoid eating on Yom Kippur. Meanwhile, his family launched a quiet, desperate operation behind the scenes. They begged the media to stay silent. They feared that if ISIS learned he was both American and Israeli, and Jewish, the consequences would be immediate and irreversible. Friends, colleagues, and entire newsrooms followed the family's wishes. They scrubbed his social media. They deleted photos. They protected him the only way they could, by erasing his identity from the public eye. That fragile silence was shattered the moment ISIS released the James Foley beheading video. Suddenly, the world knew there was another hostage, a second journalist waiting in line. Steven's name raced across headlines. The clock started ticking. His final days were filled with flickers of hope. On August 27, 2014, his mother released an emotional video plea directly to ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Journalists launched petitions. International organizations offered help. But in ISIS's world, compassion wasn't currency. 6 days later, the site intelligence group discovered the video titled, "A Second Message to America." Steven Sotloff had been executed. The outrage was immediate. President Barack Obama addressed the nation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a crime against humanity. Pope Francis expressed deep sorrow. Across the world, reporters held moments of silence. People who had never heard of Sotloff now mourn him as a symbol of everything journalism stands for. But Sotloff's legacy didn't end in that desert. His family created the Stephen Joel Sotloff Memorial Two Lives Foundation, named after a line from a handwritten letter he smuggled out during captivity. Everyone has two lives. The second one begins when you realize you only have one. The foundation now supports journalists in conflict zones, funds scholarships, and advocates for hostage policy reforms. His death also forced the U.S. government to rethink its stance on hostage negotiations, leading to new policies that allow families to communicate and negotiate without fear of prosecution. Memorials appeared across Florida and Israel. Gardens, plaques, and symbolic art pieces overlooking the ocean. And his personal philosophy, shared with friends before his final assignment, became a guiding message. Love each other. Don't fight over nonsense. Stay positive. Be patient. Live your life to the fullest. Steven Sotloff wasn't just a journalist. He was a witness, a truth teller, a man who put humanity above safety. His courage didn't fade with his final breath. It multiplied. And as powerful as his story is, it's not the end, because up next is the chilling tale of a Japanese journalist, one who put his own life on the line trying to save someone else. January 31st, 2015, silence swallowed the world as Kenji Goto, steady, calm, dignified, waited for whatever came next. But this moment didn't define him. It was only the end of a story built on compassion, courage, and an unshakable belief that truth mattered. To understand why he was here, you have to go back decades, long before ISIS existed, long before war changed everything. Kenji Goto was born in Sendai in 1967, and from the moment he picked up a camera, he knew exactly what kind of journalist he wanted to be. Not the kind who chases explosions from a safe distance, but the kind who stands with the people living through them. After graduating from Hosei University in 1991, he began reporting from the world's most dangerous corners: Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, Iraq, places most reporters avoided. His specialty wasn't the battles, it was the humans inside them. Parents searching for missing children. Kids are trying to go to school despite bullets in the streets. Families rebuilding their homes by hand after bombings. He founded Independent Press in 1996 to give these overlooked stories a home. His documentaries aired on major Japanese networks, and his children's books, simple, honest, powerful, helped young readers understand the weight of war. Everywhere he went, he carried the same quiet philosophy: make every day meaningful, see people, not politics, choose compassion over anger, Even on Twitter, he spoke like someone who believed in the best parts of humanity. One message, shared tens of thousands of times after his death, read, "Close your eyes, bear it. If we become angry and yell, we are doomed. Hate is not for humans. Judgment belongs to God." That was Kenji, gentle, empathetic, and unwilling to let war strip him of hope. By 2014, though, years of conflict reporting had taken their toll. He confided to friends that he was tired of being shelled, beaten, detained, and accused of being a spy. He wanted to go home. He wanted rest. But when he heard fellow Japanese citizen Haruna Yukawa had been captured in Syria, he couldn't ignore it. Goto believed he could get Yukawa out. Maybe it was loyalty, maybe it was idealism, maybe it was simply who he was. Despite direct warnings from the Japanese government, he entered Syria in late October 2014. He was captured almost immediately. The months that followed were a blur of interrogations, beatings, psychological torture, and yet, even then, Goto never broke. He protected his colleagues. He shielded the identities of his contacts. He hid his Christian faith. Prisoners later said he comforted others, shared what little he had, and somehow held on to his compassion in a place built to destroy it. His family kept the kidnapping secret for months, hoping silence would save him. After ISIS released the video of James Foley's murder, everything changed. Goto was forced into their propaganda footage, and the world learned he was alive, but in danger that was growing by the day. His mother released an emotional video pleading for mercy. Japan scrambled to negotiate. Journalists, activists, and strangers begged ISIS to spare him. But on January 31st, 2015, the militants released the execution video. Kenji Goto was gone. Japan mourned like it had lost a national treasure. And in many ways, it had. Goto wasn't just a reporter. He was a bridge between cultures, a man who turned strangers into stories, and stories into understanding. His documentaries remain required viewing. His children's books are still taught in classrooms. His final writings are studied by journalism students worldwide. In one of those writings, he reflected on the emotional cost of his calling. We need not shed tears when reporting. We must record what we see, the injustice, the sadness, the danger. But pain is still pain. And if I do not speak to myself, I cannot do this job anymore. He kept speaking to himself, to the world, until the very end. Kenji Goto's legacy isn't defined by the brutality of his death, but by the humanity he carried into every war zone he entered. He showed that courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it's a camera, a notebook, and a voice determined to make suffering visible. And while Goto walked willingly into danger for the sake of others, the next case unfolds in the exact opposite way, where a young Israeli American wasn't seeking conflict at all. He was simply attending a music festival. October 7th, 2023, 23-year-old Hersh Goldberg-Polin was among hundreds of young people celebrating at the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel. It was supposed to be a night of music and peace. Instead, it became a nightmare that would span almost a year, ending in one of the most publicized and heart-wrenching tragedies of the Israel-Gaza hostage crisis. Goldberg-Polin was born on October 3, 2000, in Berkeley, California. His parents, John Polin and Rachel Goldberg, both originally from Chicago, later moved the family to Israel in 2008. Hersh was a laid-back, happy-go-lucky young man, obsessed with geography and travel since childhood. His bedroom overflowed with atlases, globes, and National Geographic magazines. He had just completed his mandatory Israel Defense Forces service in April 2023 and was planning a 2-year world tour starting in December. But that trip would never happen. That October morning, as rockets began to fall, Hersh and his best friend Anar Shapira, along with 27 other festival goers, took refuge in a small bomb shelter. Hamas militants soon discovered them and began lobbing grenades inside. Anar, standing in the doorway, managed to throw back 7 grenades before the 8th one killed him. Hersh, left-handed, helped throw grenades out until one exploded, shredding his left arm from the elbow down. In spite of his life-threatening injury, Hersh managed to fashion a tourniquet for himself. Witnesses later described seeing him, with exposed bone protruding from his left arm, being loaded onto a truck by Hamas militants. The last footage of him before captivity shows a man bloodied but defiant, His life forever changed. Even in those last moments before capture, Hersh stayed connected to his loved ones. At around 8 a.m., he sent his family a simple text message, "I love you." 10 minutes later, another, "I'm sorry." His parents, John and Rachel, immediately began a tireless international campaign for their son's release. They spoke to world leaders, including Pope Francis, President Joe Biden, and United Nations officials. Rachel wore a shirt with the number of days Hersh had been held hostage, updating it daily. Their campaign became a symbol of the hostage family's pain and determination. A breakthrough came in April 2024 when Hamas released a 3-minute video of Hersh in captivity. Speaking in Hebrew, he identified himself, described his underground hell, and called on the Israeli government to act. The video showed his healed amputation, proof that he had survived the initial attack, but was still suffering. Despite ongoing negotiations and temporary ceasefires, Hersh remained in captivity. He was not included in the November 2023 exchange that saw 105 hostages traded for 240 Palestinian prisoners. His family continued to fight, organizing rallies and speaking at major events. At the Democratic National Convention, his father declared, "This is a humanitarian issue," while wearing tape marked with the number of days Hersh had been held. The tragedy reached its climax on August 31st, 2024. Israeli forces discovered Hersh's body, along with 5 other hostages, in a Hamas tunnel in Rafah. Autopsies revealed they had been executed at close range, just 1-2 days before the recovery. Hersh was supposedly next on the list for release in an upcoming ceasefire deal that never came. Hamas initially denied executing the hostages, blaming Israeli airstrikes, but video evidence and later statements revealed a new Hamas policy: to execute hostages if rescue attempts were made, rather than allowing peaceful release through negotiations. The news of Hersh's death sparked mass protests throughout Israel and worldwide. Days later, Hamas released videos of the hostages' last statements, including Hersh's final words. His funeral in Jerusalem drew thousands, including Israel's president and players from his beloved Hapoel Jerusalem football club. International tributes poured in, including from German club Werder Bremen, which had supported his cause throughout his captivity. The United States Department of Justice immediately unsealed charges against 6 Hamas leaders, including terrorism, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals, and conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction resulting in death, specifically citing Hersh's killing. President Biden issued a statement. Hersh was among the innocents brutally attacked while attending a music festival for peace in Israel. He lost his arm helping friends and strangers during Hamas's savage massacre. He had just turned 23. He planned to travel the world. I have gotten to know his parents, John and Rachel. They have been courageous, wise, and steadfast, even as they have endured the unimaginable. Make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes. Hersh Goldberg-Polin's story became a symbol of the hostage crisis, not just for his personal tragedy, but for what it represented about the broader conflict. A young man who tried to bridge divides, who decorated his room with messages of unity in 3 languages, whose life was cut short by a conflict that continues to claim innocent lives. His family's battle for justice continues, even as they mourn. As Rachel Goldberg-Polin said at his funeral, having Hersh as a son was a stunning honor. His legacy now serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war and the urgent need for peace. But Hersh's story is not just about loss. It's about resilience, family, and the power of hope in the face of unimaginable darkness.